Before we begin, this is what should have been her perfect day. More than just a story, it's about choices, emotions, and moments that change everything. If you love stories that feel real, subscribe, hit the bell, and comment below. Let's dive in. Sarah had been planning her 35th birthday party for months, pouring her heart into every single detail. She had spent countless evenings scrolling through Pinterest boards, comparing catering menus, and creating the perfect guest list. This wasn't just any birthday. It was a milestone, a celebration of the life she had built, and she wanted it to reflect everything she had achieved. Her career was thriving, she had an amazing circle of friends, and most importantly, she had Marcus, her husband of 6 years, her partner, the man she thought she would grow old with. Every decision she made about the party was infused with joy and anticipation. She chose a lakeside restaurant that held special meaning for them. It was where Marcus had proposed on a warm summer evening 3 years into their relationship. The symbolism felt perfect. Throughout the planning process, Marcus had seemed genuinely engaged and supportive. He had offered to handle the venue booking, personally reaching out to the restaurant manager to secure their best outdoor terrace. He had helped her narrow down the guest list, suggesting they invite some colleagues from her office to make the celebration feel more inclusive. "You work so hard," he had told her one evening as they sat together reviewing the invitations. "You deserve to celebrate with everyone who matters to you." Those words had meant everything to Sarah. In recent months, she had worried that Marcus seemed distant, that the spark between them had dimmed somewhat. But his enthusiasm for her birthday had reassured her. She had convinced herself that they were just going through a normal phase that all married couples experience, and that this party would be a fresh start for them, a reminder of why they had fallen in love in the first place. The night of the party arrived with perfect weather, a warm evening with a gentle breeze coming off the lake. Sarah had spent the entire afternoon getting ready, carefully applying her makeup and styling her hair in loose waves. She wore the emerald green dress she had bought specifically for this occasion, the one that made her feel confident and beautiful. When Marcus saw her, he had smiled and told her she looked stunning, and for a moment, everything felt right in her world. They arrived at the venue early to check on the final arrangements. The restaurant staff had outdone themselves. Fairy lights were strung across the outdoor terrace, creating a magical canopy of twinkling stars. White and gold balloons clustered at each table, and a beautiful floral centerpiece adorned the main table. Soft jazz music played in the background, setting a sophisticated yet relaxed atmosphere. As guests began to arrive, Sarah felt a surge of happiness wash over her. Her sister Emily was among the first, bringing with her a beautifully wrapped gift and an enormous hug. Jessica, her best friend since college, arrived shortly after with her husband Tom. Old friends from university, colleagues from work, neighbors, and family members trickled in, each bringing warmth and well wishes. Sarah moved through the crowd like a butterfly, accepting hugs, kisses on the cheek, and countless happy birthdays. She introduced people who hadn't met before, made sure everyone had drinks, and soaked in the love that filled the evening air. Nearly 50 people had gathered to celebrate her, and the gratitude she felt was overwhelming. Marcus worked the crowd as well, playing the role of the attentive husband, ensuring guests were comfortable and making small talk with people he knew and didn't know alike. For the first hour, everything went exactly as Sarah had imagined. The catering staff circulated with trays of appetizers, delicate bruschetta, stuffed mushrooms, and prawns wrapped in bacon. The bar was well stocked, and guests seemed genuinely happy to be there. Sarah's work colleague Amanda had arrived fashionably late, apologizing profusely and blaming traffic. Sarah had hugged her warmly, genuinely pleased she had made it. Amanda worked in a different department, but they had developed a friendly rapport over office lunches and the occasional after-work drinks. Sarah had thought nothing of inviting her. She believed in mixing friend groups and making everyone feel included. As the evening progressed, Sarah caught glimpses of Marcus chatting with various guests, laughing at someone's joke, refilling drinks. From the outside, they looked like the perfect couple hosting the perfect party. But perfection, as Sarah was about to discover, was nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. Sarah had just finished a lengthy conversation with her sister Emily about their parents' upcoming anniversary when she realized she couldn't remember the last time she had seen Marcus. She scanned the terrace, her eyes moving from group to group, table to table. She checked the bar area where he had been standing 20 minutes ago. Not there. She looked toward the lake view where some guests were taking photos. No sign of him. A small flutter of concern stirred in her chest, but she pushed it aside. There were nearly 50 people at this party, spread across the terrace and spilling into the restaurant's interior. Marcus was probably just inside using the restroom or had stepped away to take a phone call. He had an important client project at work. Maybe something urgent had come up. Sarah told herself not to be paranoid, not to be that wife who needed to know her husband's whereabouts every single minute. Sarah was accepting a drink from a passing waiter when Jessica appeared at her elbow, slightly flushed from the wine and the warmth of the evening. "This party is absolutely perfect, Sarah," Jessica gushed, linking her arm through Sarah's. "You've outdone yourself. Now, where's that handsome husband of yours? Tom and I want to do a proper toast before the cake, and we need both of you for that." Sarah's smile faltered just slightly. "I'm not sure, actually. I think he went inside for something." Jessica didn't seem to notice Sarah's uncertainty. "Well, we should track him down. Your mum's been asking about the cake ceremony, and you know how she gets about keeping to a schedule." Jessica laughed, but Sarah felt that flutter of concern grow into something heavier. It had been at least 20 minutes, maybe longer. Where was he? Sarah excused herself from the group and began a more systematic search of the venue. She checked the main bar again, this time asking the bartender if he had seen Marcus. "The tall guy in the blue shirt. Yeah, I saw him maybe half an hour ago, but not since then," the bartender replied with a friendly shrug. Sarah nodded and continued her search. She walked through the main dining area of the restaurant, which was closed to regular customers for the evening but still accessible to party guests who wanted a quieter space. A few older relatives were sitting at tables inside, escaping the noise of the terrace, but no Marcus. She checked the parking area, thinking perhaps he had gone to the car for something. The lot was full of vehicles but empty of people. The evening air felt suddenly cooler, and Sarah rubbed her arms, feeling goosebumps rise on her skin. Standing in the parking area, Sarah pulled out her phone and composed a text message to Marcus. "Where are you?" "About to do the cake." She hit send and watched as the message changed from sending to delivered. She waited, staring at the screen, expecting to see the 3 dots that would indicate he was typing a response. Nothing. 30 seconds passed. Minute. Still nothing. The knot in Sarah's stomach that had started as a small flutter was now pulled tight. This wasn't like Marcus. Even when he was busy or distracted, he always responded to her messages, especially at an event as important as this. She tried calling him, but the call went straight to voicemail after one ring. Had he declined the call? Or was his phone on silent? Neither option made sense. Why would his phone be on silent at her birthday party? Why would he decline her call? Sarah stood in the parking area for another moment, her mind racing through possibilities. Maybe he had felt unwell and had gone to the car to lie down. Maybe he had received an emergency call from his family and had stepped away to deal with it in private. Maybe his phone had died. But even as she constructed these rational explanations, something deeper and more instinctive told her that none of them were true. There was something wrong about this situation, something that didn't add up. She thought back over the evening, trying to remember the last time she had actually seen Marcus. It had been during the appetizer service, at least 45 minutes ago. He had been talking to someone near the bar. She closed her eyes, trying to visualize the scene. Who had he been talking to? She couldn't quite picture it. The memory was frustratingly hazy. Sarah walked back toward the restaurant, her heels clicking against the pavement with purpose now. She was done making excuses for him. If Marcus had a legitimate reason for disappearing from her birthday party for nearly an hour, he could explain it to her face. She bypassed the terrace where her guests were still mingling, laughing, and enjoying themselves, completely unaware of the anxiety building inside her. She entered the main building through a side entrance that led to a hallway she hadn't explored yet. The restaurant was larger than most people realized, with several private dining rooms that could be booked for intimate gatherings or business meetings. These rooms were supposed to be closed tonight, unused and locked. The hallway was dimly lit, with only a few wall sconces providing a soft, amber glow. As Sarah walked deeper into the corridor, she heard something that made her stop in her tracks. At first it was barely audible, a sound that could have been anything. A muffled laugh, low and intimate. Then a voice, a woman's voice, saying something Sarah couldn't quite make out. Then another voice, deeper, unmistakably male. Sarah's heart began to pound so hard she could hear it in her ears. She knew that voice. She had listened to that voice every day for years, in the morning when it was rough with sleep, late at night when it whispered good night to her, excited when sharing good news, tender when offering comfort. It was Marcus's voice. But it was coming from one of the closed private dining rooms, and he wasn't alone. Sarah's hands began to tremble. Every instinct in her body was screaming at her to turn around, to walk away, to preserve the reality she knew. But her feet kept moving forward, drawn by a horrible certainty that whatever was behind that door would change everything. The door to the private dining room was slightly ajar, just enough that light spilled out into the dark hallway. Just enough that she could hear more clearly now. Laughter. Movement. Then silence broken by sounds that made Sarah's blood turn to ice. Sarah's hand reached for the door, and she noticed absently that her fingers were shaking. She pressed her palm against the dark wood and pushed gently. The door swung open wider, smooth and silent on its hinges. The scene before her unfolded in terrible slow motion, each detail searing itself into her memory with painful clarity. The private dining room was small and intimate, designed for business meetings or small family gatherings. A round table occupied the center, surrounded by elegant chairs. Soft lighting from a chandelier cast a warm glow over everything. And there, pressed against the wall beside a painting of the lake at sunset, were two people who had no right to be alone together in this room. Marcus, her husband, the man whose ring she wore on her finger, had his hands tangled in a woman's dark hair. The woman had her arms wrapped around his neck, her body pressed against his. They were kissing with a kind of passion and urgency that spoke of desire, of familiarity, of something that had been building for far longer than just this evening. The woman was wearing a burgundy dress that Sarah recognized. She had complimented that dress earlier in the evening when its wearer had arrived. The woman was Amanda, her colleague from work, someone she had invited to this party, someone she had welcomed into her celebration. The betrayal hit Sarah in waves, each one worse than the last. This wasn't a stranger. This wasn't some random woman Marcus had met at the party. This was someone Sarah knew, someone she worked with, someone who had looked her in the eye just an hour ago and wished her a happy birthday with a smile. The scene was so surreal that for several heartbeats, Sarah's brain refused to process what her eyes were showing her. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. Not at her birthday party. Not with someone she knew. Not with her husband. But it was real. Horrifyingly, devastatingly real. For a moment that felt like an eternity, nobody moved. Sarah stood in the doorway, her emerald dress suddenly feeling too tight. Her carefully applied makeup now a mask on a face that had forgotten how to form expressions. Marcus and Amanda remained pressed against the wall, frozen mid-embrace like figures in a photograph. The room was silent except for the faint sound of music and laughter from the party outside. A cruel reminder that while Sarah's world was shattering, everyone else's evening was continuing exactly as planned. Sarah couldn't breathe. Her chest felt compressed, as though someone had wrapped steel bands around her ribs and was slowly tightening them. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel, focused entirely on the two people in front of her. Peripherally, she was aware of other details. A wine bottle on the table with two glasses, both half empty. Amanda's purse on a chair. Marcus's jacket draped over another chair. This hadn't been a spontaneous moment. They had planned this. They had snuck away from her birthday party, found this private room, brought wine and... What is this? Sarah's voice cut through the silence like a blade through silk. It came out stronger than she expected, clearer, with an edge of steel that she didn't know she possessed. The sound of her voice shattered the frozen tableau. Marcus and Amanda sprang apart as if they had been electrocuted, creating distance between their bodies with frantic speed. Amanda's hands flew to her mouth in a gesture of shock. Marcus's face underwent a rapid transformation, from the flush of passion to the pale white of shock to something that might have been fear. His eyes were wide, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water, struggling to find oxygen. "Sarah," he started, his voice cracking on her name. "I can explain, this isn't what it looks like." But his words died in his throat because even he couldn't sell such an obvious lie. Amanda moved first. She grabbed her purse from the chair with shaking hands, her face flushed with shame and panic. She wouldn't meet Sarah's eyes, keeping her gaze fixed on the floor as she muttered something that might have been, "I'm sorry," or might have been nothing at all, just sounds escaping from a mouth that had been kissing Sarah's husband moments before. She tried to slide past Sarah without making physical contact, pressing herself against the doorframe to avoid brushing against the woman she had betrayed. Sarah stepped aside mechanically, letting her pass. Right now, Amanda wasn't her focus. Amanda was a symptom, not the disease. The real betrayal, the real devastation, came from the man still standing in the room, the man who had promised to love her, honor her, and cherish her until death did them part. The man who was supposed to be her partner, her safe harbor, her home. With Amanda gone, the room felt simultaneously larger and smaller. Sarah and Marcus faced each other across a distance of maybe 3 meters, but it might as well have been a canyon. Marcus took a step toward her, his hand reaching out in a gesture that was probably meant to be placating or comforting. "Don't," Sarah said sharply, and he froze. "Don't you dare come near me right now." Her voice was shaking now, the steel giving way to something raw and wounded. "You brought her here," she continued, her voice rising with each word. "To my birthday party. My birthday party, Marcus." The absurdity of it, the cruelty of it, hit her again. Of all the places, all the times, all the ways he could have betrayed her, he had chosen this. He had helped her plan this party, had been by her side as she agonized over every detail, had watched her excitement grow as the day approached, and all the while he had been planning this betrayal. "How long?" Sarah demanded, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "How long has this been going on?" Marcus looked at the floor, at the wall, at anywhere but her face. "Sarah, please," he said, his voice thick with something that might have been regret or might just have been fear of consequences. "Let's not do this here. Let's go somewhere private where we can talk about this properly." But Sarah was done with private. This man had chosen to humiliate her in the most public way possible, even if only she had witnessed the actual act. "Answer the question," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "How long?" Marcus ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she had seen 1,000 times when he was stressed or anxious. "A few months," he finally admitted, so quietly she almost didn't hear him. "Maybe 3. I don't know exactly." 3 months. The words hung in the air between them like a physical presence. 3 months of lies. 3 months of deception. 3 months of him kissing her goodbye in the morning and coming home to her at night while he was carrying on an affair with Amanda. Sarah's mind raced backward through the past 3 months, re-examining everything through this new, terrible lens. The late nights at work he had claimed were due to a difficult project. The weekend golf games with colleagues. The increased attention to his appearance, the new cologne, the sudden interest in going to the gym. All of it, every single thing, had been lies. Or not lies exactly, but truth with the most important details omitted. He hadn't been working late. He had been with Amanda. He hadn't been playing golf. He had been with Amanda. Every "I love you" he had spoken in the past 3 months had been tainted by the secret he was keeping. "You've been sleeping in our bed," Sarah said, the realization washing over her like ice water. "Coming home to me after being with her. looking me in the eye and lying to me every single day for 3 months. Marcus flinched as if she had struck him. It wasn't like that, he tried to protest weakly. It wasn't. I never meant to hurt you. Sarah laughed, but it was a broken sound, sharp and painful. You never meant to hurt me. Then what exactly did you think would happen when I found out? Because you had to know I would find out eventually. Or was the plan just to keep lying to me forever? She felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Not yet. Not here. You helped me invite her, Sarah continued, her voice breaking slightly. Amanda, you suggested I invite people from work. You actually helped me invite your mistress to my birthday party. Sarah stood there for another moment, looking at the man she had thought she knew, the man she had built a life with, the man who now looked like a stranger wearing a familiar face. She could feel the weight of 6 years together pressing down on her. The wedding day, the honeymoon, the house they had bought, the dreams they had shared, the future they had planned. All of it now contaminated by his betrayal. All of it now questionable. Had any of it been real? Had he ever really loved her? Or had she been living in a carefully constructed illusion this entire time? She took a deep breath, drawing on reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. I'm going back to my party, she said finally, her voice steadier now. Marcus's head snapped up, confusion and perhaps hope flickering across his face. Sarah, we need to talk about this. No, she interrupted firmly. We don't. Not right now. Right now, I'm going back to my guests, and I'm going to finish my birthday party. Marcus took another step toward her, but Sarah held up her hand, stopping him in his tracks. You have 2 choices, she said, and her voice had taken on a quality she had never heard before. Cold, hard, absolutely uncompromising. You can leave right now, quietly, and we will deal with this tomorrow when I'm ready. Or you can stay, and I will walk out onto that terrace and tell every single person at this party exactly what I just witnessed. I will tell my family. I will tell your family. I will tell our friends. I will tell Amanda's colleagues. I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are and exactly what you've done. Marcus's face went even paler. Sarah, you wouldn't. Try me, she said, and there was no doubt in her voice that she meant every word. She held his gaze, unflinching, daring him to test her resolve. This was her party, her celebration, and he had already taken enough from her tonight. He wasn't going to take anything more. For a long moment, they stood there in silent confrontation, years of marriage and shared history hanging in the balance. Then, without a word, Marcus grabbed his jacket from the chair. He moved toward the door, pausing when he reached Sarah, as if he might try one more time to say something, to explain or apologize or make some pathetic attempt at damage control. But whatever he saw in her eyes made him think better of it. He walked past her and out into the hallway. Sarah followed at a distance, watching as he made his way toward the side exit, not the terrace where the party continued. She watched him disappear into the parking area, and moments later, she heard the sound of his car engine starting. Then he was gone, leaving behind only the echoes of shattered vows and broken trust. Sarah stood alone in the hallway, her back pressed against the cool wall, and finally allowed herself a moment to feel the full weight of what had just happened. Her legs felt weak, her hands were still trembling, and there was a hollow, aching sensation in her chest where her heart was supposed to be. She closed her eyes and took several deep breaths, in through her nose and out through her mouth, a technique she had learned in a yoga class years ago. She couldn't fall apart. Not yet. Not when 50 people were waiting for her on the terrace. Not when her family and friends were gathered to celebrate her. She wouldn't let Marcus take this night from her too. He had taken her trust, her marriage, her sense of security, and her vision of the future. He wasn't going to take her dignity as well. There was a restroom nearby, and Sarah slipped inside to check her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger. Same emerald dress, same carefully styled hair, same makeup, but with eyes that held a knowledge they hadn't possessed an hour ago. She touched up her lipstick with shaking hands, dabbed at the corners of her eyes where tears threatened to fall, and practiced smiling until it looked almost natural. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and took one more deep breath. Then she walked out of the restroom and back toward the terrace, toward the music and laughter, toward the people who loved her. Every step was an act of will, every movement a conscious choice to keep going, to not collapse, to not let the pain show on her face. Sarah had barely stepped onto the terrace when Jessica materialized at her side, as if pulled by some invisible thread of friendship. One look at Sarah's face, and Jessica's expression changed from cheerful party host to concerned friend. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately, her voice low and urgent. "Where's Marcus?" "Sarah, you look, what happened?" Sarah glanced around at the party still in full swing. Her sister was chatting with her mother near the lake railing. Colleagues from work were laughing at someone's story by the bar. Neighbors were taking photos with the sunset as a backdrop. Nobody knew. Nobody could tell that the woman at the center of this celebration had just had her world torn apart. "Not here," Sarah murmured, gently taking Jessica's elbow and guiding her toward a quieter corner of the terrace, away from the main groups. In rushed, whispered sentences, Sarah told Jessica everything. She watched her best friend's face cycle through shock, disbelief, and finally fury. "That absolute," Jessica started, her voice rising, but Sarah quickly placed a hand on her arm. "Not tonight," Sarah said firmly, and Jessica heard something in her voice that made her stop and really look at her friend. "I'm not letting him take this away from me too. He's already taken enough. I'm going to cut that cake, I'm going to thank everyone for coming, and I'm going to get through this night with my head held high. Tomorrow I'll fall apart. Tomorrow I'll cry and scream and figure out what happens next. But tonight I'm going to finish my birthday party." Jessica's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back quickly. "Okay," she said, squeezing Sarah's hand. "Okay. What do you need me to do?" "Help me get through this," Sarah said simply. And Jessica did. Together, they gathered the guests for the cake ceremony. Sarah's mother wheeled out the beautiful 3-tiered cake she had ordered from Sarah's favorite bakery. Vanilla sponge with raspberry filling and cream cheese frosting, decorated with delicate sugar flowers. Emily, Sarah's sister, noticed Marcus's absence and shot Sarah a questioning look, her eyes searching the crowd. Sarah gave her a subtle shake of the head and a look that clearly communicated, "Not now, I'll explain later." Emily frowned but nodded, understanding that something was wrong but respecting Sarah's silent request to keep up appearances. The crowd gathered around as Jessica began a toast, speaking warmly about Sarah's friendship, her kindness, her strength, and how much she meant to everyone present. Other friends chimed in with funny stories and heartfelt tributes. When everyone began singing, "Happy Birthday," Sarah felt the tears threatening again, but she forced them back through sheer willpower. She looked around at all these faces, family members who had known her since birth, friends who had stood by her through various life challenges, colleagues who respected her professionally, neighbors who had become companions. These people were real. Their affection for her was real. Whatever had just happened with Marcus didn't diminish any of this. As the song ended, Sarah leaned forward to blow out the candles. "Make a wish," someone called out. Sarah closed her eyes. In the past, she might have wished for happiness, for continued love with Marcus, for a future filled with possibility. But tonight her wish was different. She wished for strength. She wished for clarity. She wished for the courage to face whatever came next and the wisdom to rebuild her life from these ashes. She blew out all the candles in one breath, and the crowd erupted in applause. For the next 2 hours, Sarah performed the role of happy birthday girl with an Academy Award-worthy effort. She cut the cake and served pieces to guests. She accepted gifts and hugs and birthday wishes with genuine smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes. She posed for photos, knowing that someday she would look back at these images and see the pain hidden beneath the smile. When people asked about Marcus, she had a rehearsed answer ready. He wasn't feeling well and had to head home early. You know how it is. Most people accepted this explanation without question. A few looked slightly skeptical but were too polite to push. Only her closest friends and family, Jessica, Emily, her mother, seemed to sense that something more significant was wrong, but they respected her silent request not to discuss it until later. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Sarah thanked each person for coming, accepted their hugs and kisses goodbye, and watched them disappear into the night. With each departure, she felt the weight of maintaining her composure grow heavier. It was like holding up a tremendous weight with muscles that were threatening to give out at any moment. When the last guest had finally left, Sarah stood on the empty terrace surrounded by the debris of celebration. Empty glasses, crumpled napkins, deflated balloons, and the remnants of her cake. The fairy lights still twinkled overhead, beautiful and indifferent to the drama that had unfolded beneath them. Jessica and Emily appeared on either side of her, each linking an arm through hers without speaking. "Let's get you out of here," Emily said softly. Sarah nodded, suddenly exhausted beyond anything she had ever experienced. The adrenaline that had kept her going through the past few hours was draining away, leaving behind only bone-deep weariness. Sarah woke up in her sister's guest bedroom with sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a few blissful seconds, she couldn't remember where she was or why. Then it all came rushing back with the force of a physical blow. Marcus, Amanda, the private dining room, the kiss, the betrayal. She rolled over and saw her dress from the previous night draped over a chair. Her heels kicked off carelessly by the door. Her phone sat on the nightstand, and even from across the room, she could see the screen lit up with notifications. Her head ached with a dull, persistent throb that came from crying herself to sleep. Her eyes felt swollen, her throat was raw, and there was a hollow, sick feeling in her stomach. She had managed to hold it together through the entire party, but once they got back to Emily's house, the dam had finally broken. She had sobbed for what felt like hours while Emily held her and Jessica paced the room, periodically cursing Marcus's name. Sarah reached for her phone with a sense of dread. 17 missed calls from Marcus. 34 text messages. 3 voicemails. She scrolled through the messages without opening them, reading the previews. "Sarah, please, I'm so sorry. We need to talk about this. It was a mistake, it didn't mean anything. Please come home so we can discuss this like adults. You're overreacting." That last one made her hand tighten around the phone. Overreacting. As if catching your husband having an affair at your own birthday party was something one could overreact to. She was about to put the phone down when she noticed a message from an unknown number. Her finger hovered over it for a moment before curiosity got the better of her. She opened it. The message was from Amanda. "Sarah, I don't expect you to read this or respond, and I don't expect forgiveness. But I need you to know that I'm deeply sorry for what happened. I never intended for things to go this far, and I especially never intended for you to find out this way. Marcus told me that you and he were separated and in the process of filing for divorce. He said you were only staying in the same house for financial reasons while the lawyers worked things out. He said the marriage had been over for more than a year. I know that's not an excuse, and I should have done more to verify what he was telling me, but I want you to know that I would never have gotten involved with him if I had known the truth. I've already informed our HR department about the relationship and requested a transfer to a different location. Again, I'm truly sorry. You deserve so much better than what happened to you." Sarah read the message 3 times, each reading making her feel sicker than the last. Marcus had told Amanda they were separated. He had built an entire fiction about their marriage being over, about them being in the process of divorce. This hadn't been a spontaneous affair, a moment of weakness, a mistake. This had been calculated. He had created an elaborate lie to make himself available to Amanda while still coming home to Sarah every night. While Sarah had been worrying about the state of their marriage and trying to convince herself they were just going through a rough patch, Marcus had been telling his mistress that the marriage was already over. How long had he been planning to leave her? Or had he been planning to leave her at all? Maybe the plan had been to continue indefinitely, a wife at home and a girlfriend on the side, each of them believing they had his commitment. A soft knock on the bedroom door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Sarah, are you awake?" Jessica's voice was gentle, careful. "Come in," Sarah called, her voice rough from crying. Jessica entered carrying a tray with coffee and toast. Emily had to run out for groceries, but she'll be back soon. I figured you might need this. She set the tray on the bedside table and sat on the edge of the bed. Sarah showed her Amanda's message without saying anything. Jessica read it, her jaw clenching tighter with each sentence. He told her you were separated, she said finally, her voice vibrating with anger. That manipulative, she stopped herself, taking a deep breath. Okay, babe. So now we know. This wasn't just an affair. This was systematic deception of both you and her. I need to figure out what to do next, Sarah said, pulling her knees up to her chest and wrapping her arms around them. I can't go back to the house. I can't face him. But I also can't hide at my sister's forever. Jessica nodded thoughtfully. First things first. You need a lawyer. Really good one. My cousin Diane specializes in divorce cases, and she's absolutely ruthless. I'll call her this morning if you want. Sarah felt a wave of nausea at the word divorce, but she forced herself to nod. Yes, babe. A lawyer. Saying it out loud made it real, made it official. Her marriage was ending. 6 years of her life were being severed. What about your things? Jessica asked. Do you need to get clothes, important documents, anything from the house? Sarah thought about the house she shared with Marcus. Her house. Except now she realized it had never really been theirs. It had been hers and his, two separate people living under the same roof while he maintained a secret life she knew nothing about. My documents are in the filing cabinet in the home office. Birth certificate, passport, banking information, insurance papers. I'll need all of that. He paused, thinking. And clothes. Enough for at least a few weeks. I don't want to keep going back there. We can go together, Jessica offered. Today while Marcus is at work. Quick in and out, get what you need and leave. Sarah nodded, grateful for the practicality. For someone to help her think through logistics when her brain felt like it was moving through thick fog. He's been calling and texting non-stop, Sarah said, gesturing to her phone. I don't know what to say to him. Jessica took the phone from Sarah's hand and looked at the endless string of messages. You don't have to say anything to him. Not yet. Not until you've had time to process this and figure out what you want to say. And when you do decide to respond, it should be through a lawyer. She paused, then added, Do you want me to block his number for now? Sarah considered this. Part of her wanted to maintain that line of communication, to keep that door open, perhaps out of habit or perhaps because cutting off all contact felt too final, too real. But another part of her, a stronger, clearer part, knew that talking to Marcus right now would accomplish nothing. He would apologize, make excuses, promise to change, and she might be tempted to believe him because believing him was easier than facing the hard truth. Yes, she said finally. Block him. If he needs to reach me, he can do it through a lawyer. Emily came back from the grocery store loaded with bags, which she proceeded to unpack in the kitchen while Sarah and Jessica sat at the breakfast bar. She had bought everything Sarah liked. Her favorite tea, the granola she ate every morning, fresh fruit, comfort foods. The simple kindness of it made Sarah's eyes well up with tears again. I'm not going to ask if you're okay because that's a stupid question, Emily said as she put milk in the refrigerator. But I am going to ask what you need from me. Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to be distracted from it? Do you want to be left alone? Just tell me what would help. Sarah smiled weakly at her sister. I think I need to cry some more, she admitted. And then I need to start figuring out the practical stuff. Jessica suggested going to the house today while Marcus is at work to get my things. I'll come too, Emily said immediately. Safety in numbers. Plus, you'll need help carrying boxes. The three women sat around the kitchen table, and Sarah felt a surge of gratitude for these two people who had dropped everything to be here for her. In the past 24 hours, she had lost her marriage, but she had gained a clearer understanding of who her real support system was. I keep thinking about all the signs I missed, Sarah said quietly. The late nights, the new cologne, the way he was on his phone constantly. How did I not see it? Because you trusted him, Jessica said firmly. Because you're not a paranoid person who suspects infidelity at every turn. Because you had no reason to believe your husband was lying to you. None of this is your fault, Sarah. Not even a little bit. 3 hours later, Sarah stood outside the house she had shared with Marcus for 4 years. It looked exactly the same as it had 2 days ago when she had left for her birthday party, full of excitement and anticipation. The garden still needed weeding. The paint on the front door was still slightly chipped. The welcome mat still said "Home Sweet Home" in cheerful letters. But everything was different now. Emily parked in the driveway behind Sarah's car, which had been there since the party. Marcus's car was gone. He was at work, just as they had planned. Jessica had called his office pretending to be a potential client to confirm he was there, and would be in meetings for the next few hours. They had a window of time to get in, pack what Sarah needed, and get out before he returned. Sarah's hands shook as she unlocked the front door. Stepping inside felt surreal, like entering a stage set designed to look like her life but lacking any real substance. The living room looked normal, the couch where she and Marcus watched movies, the bookshelf filled with their combined collection, the framed photos on the walls showing their life together. Their wedding photo hung above the fireplace, both of them smiling, convinced they were beginning a beautiful forever. Sarah looked away from it quickly. Emily touched her shoulder gently. "Where do you want to start?" Sarah took a breath and straightened her shoulders. "My office. I need to get all my important documents first." The home office was technically a shared space, but Sarah had always been the organized one, the one who handled their filing and record-keeping. She went directly to the filing cabinet and began pulling folders. Birth certificate, passport, social security card, insurance documents, bank statements, investment records, the deed to the house, their marriage certificate. That one made her pause for a moment, seeing both their signatures, remembering the hope she had felt signing that document. She added it to the pile. She would need it for the divorce. Jessica appeared with a banker's box. "Put everything in here. We'll sort through it later." While Sarah collected documents, she noticed Marcus's laptop sitting on the desk. It was closed, probably out of battery. For a moment, she considered opening it, searching through his emails and messages, looking for evidence of the affair. But she stopped herself. What would be the point? She had already seen everything she needed to see. More details would only bring more pain. Moving to the bedroom was harder. This was the most intimate space they had shared, where they had slept side by side for years, where they had been vulnerable with each other, where she had believed they were building a life together. The bed was unmade, Marcus's side showing clear signs that he had slept there last night, or more likely hadn't slept much, had tossed and turned thinking about what he had lost. Good, Sarah thought with a flash of vindictiveness that surprised her. She hoped he hadn't slept at all. She went to the closet and began pulling out clothes, packing them into the suitcases Emily had brought from the car. She took practical items: work clothes, casual clothes, shoes, her winter coat. She left behind the lingerie Marcus had bought her for their last anniversary, left behind the dress she had worn on their honeymoon, left behind anything that held specific memories of him. As Sarah was clearing out her nightstand drawer, she found something that made her freeze. It was a credit card statement that must have fallen behind the drawer at some point. She pulled it out and looked at the date, from 4 months ago. Her eyes scanned the charges and her stomach dropped. Dinner at an expensive restaurant she had never been to. Flowers from a florist. Flowers she had never received. A charge from a hotel in the city, dated on a day when Marcus had told her he was at a conference. A jewelry purchase from a store she didn't recognize. The evidence of his affair was right here, documented in credit card charges. He hadn't even been particularly careful about hiding it. Or maybe he had been, and this statement slipping behind the drawer was just bad luck. Either way, Sarah took photos of every page with her phone. Her lawyer would need this. Curiosity and something darker, maybe a need to know the full extent of his betrayal, drove Sarah to Marcus's nightstand. She opened the drawer, not sure what she was looking for. Inside, tucked under some magazines and old receipts, was a small jewelry box. Her heart pounding, Sarah opened it. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small heart charm. It clearly wasn't for her. She had never seen it before, and Marcus hadn't given her any jewelry recently. This was meant for Amanda. He had bought jewelry for his mistress and kept it in their shared bedroom, just feet from where Sarah slept every night. The violation of it, the sheer audacity and disrespect, took her breath away. "Sarah," Emily called from the hallway. "You okay in there?" "I'm fine," Sarah managed to call back, though her voice sounded strange even to her own ears. She took a photo of the bracelet as well, then closed the box and left it in the drawer. Let him wonder if she had found it. They were in the kitchen, Sarah packing up some of her favorite cooking items, when her phone rang. Jessica's phone, actually. Sarah's number was blocked. Jessica looked at the screen and mouthed "Marcus" to Sarah. Sarah shook her head emphatically, but Jessica had a different idea. She answered the call. "Marcus," she said, her voice cold. "No, this is Jessica, and before you ask, Sarah doesn't want to talk to you. Ever. You'll be hearing from her lawyer in the next few days. Until then, stay away from her." Marcus's voice came through the phone, loud enough that Sarah could hear him from across the kitchen. He was talking fast, the words tumbling over each other. "Please, I just need to explain, it's not what she thinks, I made a mistake." "You made a lot of mistakes," Jessica cut him off. "You made mistakes for 3 months straight. You made a mistake when you brought your mistress to your wife's birthday party. You made a mistake when you lied to both of them about your situation. Those weren't mistakes, Marcus. Those were choices." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Marcus said something that made Sarah's blood run cold. "Is she at the house? Is Sarah at the house right now?" Jessica's eyes met Sarah's. "That's none of your business. What you need to worry about is finding yourself a good lawyer, because Sarah's is going to tear you apart." She hung up without waiting for a response. "We should hurry," Emily said, already moving faster, grabbing boxes and bags. "He might leave work and come here." The 3 women went into efficient packing mode, moving through the house with speed and purpose. Sarah grabbed photo albums. Not the ones with Marcus in them, but the ones from her childhood, her family, her life before him. She took artwork she had bought herself, books that were meaningful to her, small keepsakes that held memories independent of her marriage. 20 minutes later, Emily's car was packed full of boxes, suitcases, and bags. Sarah stood in the doorway of the house one last time, taking in the space that was no longer her home. She had been happy here once. She had imagined growing old here, raising children here, building a lifetime of memories here. All of that was gone now, replaced by the bitter knowledge of betrayal. She pulled off her wedding ring, the ring she had worn every day for 6 years, and set it on the small table in the entryway. She didn't leave a note. The ring said everything that needed to be said. Then Sarah walked out, pulled the door shut behind her, and didn't look back. 2 days later, Sarah sat in a sleek downtown office across from Diane Martinez, the divorce attorney Jessica had recommended. Diane was in her early 50s, with sharp eyes and an air of competence that Sarah found reassuring. She listened without interruption as Sarah told her story, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When Sarah finished, Diane sat back in her chair and nodded. "First, I'm sorry this happened to you. Second, from a legal standpoint you have a strong case. The evidence you've collected is excellent. The credit card statements, the photos, the text message from Amanda. Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state, which means we don't need to prove wrongdoing to get a divorce, but this evidence will be very helpful in negotiations regarding asset division." Diane walked Sarah through what the divorce process would look like. Filing the petition, serving Marcus with papers, mandatory waiting periods, disclosure of assets, negotiations on division of property, and potentially, if they couldn't agree on terms, a trial. "Most divorces don't go to trial," Diane explained. "Usually, we can reach a settlement through negotiation. But you should be prepared for every possibility." Sarah's head spun with legal terminology. Complaint for divorce, respondent, petitioner, equitable distribution, marital assets. "The house is in both your names?" Diane asked. Sarah nodded. We bought it together 4 years ago. We've been splitting the mortgage payments evenly, though I've been paying for most of the renovations out of my own account. Good, Diane said. Keep documentation of that. Any other major assets? Sarah thought about their finances. We have joint savings and checking accounts. We both have retirement accounts through our jobs. My car is in my name, his is in his. No kids, thankfully. She felt a pang at that last part. They had talked about having children, had even discussed trying soon. Thank God they hadn't. Thank God there were no children who would be hurt by this divorce, who would have to navigate split custody and broken promises. No alimony concerns, Diane noted. You both work, you make comparable salaries from what you've told me. This should be relatively straightforward in terms of financial division. The house will be the main point of negotiation. You'll either need to sell it and split the proceeds, or one of you will buy out the other's share. When would the papers be served? Sarah asked. The idea of Marcus receiving divorce papers felt simultaneously terrifying and empowering. It would make everything official, real, irreversible. I can have them filed by the end of this week, Diane said. Once filed, they'll be served to him within a few days. He'll have a certain amount of time to respond. That's when we'll find out if he's going to make this easy or difficult. What if he contests it? Sarah asked. Diane gave her a slight smile. Sarah, you caught him cheating at your birthday party. He was having an affair for 3 months. Unless he's a complete fool, he's not going to contest the divorce itself. He might push back on financial terms or try to negotiate the details, but the divorce itself, that's happening. Is there any part of you that wants to try to work this out? Diane asked gently. I have to ask because I need to know where your head is at. Some people, even after significant betrayal, want to try marriage counseling, want to see if the relationship can be salvaged. I need to know if that's something you're considering. Sarah didn't even have to think about it. No, she said firmly. Even if I could somehow forgive the affair, I can't forgive the rest of it. He lied to me every day for 3 months. He brought his mistress to my birthday party. He told her we were already separated, which means he was planning his exit while still living with me, sleeping next to me, telling me he loved me. That's not something marriage counseling can fix. That's a fundamental lack of respect and integrity. Diane nodded approvingly. Good. That clarity will serve you well through this process. Now let's talk about practical matters. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? My sister's, Sarah confirmed. For as long as I need to be there. Perfect. I'm going to advise you not to have any contact with Marcus except through me. If he tries to call, email, show up at your sister's place, you let me know immediately and don't engage. All communication goes through lawyers from this point forward. This protects you legally and emotionally. The meeting lasted another hour as they went over details, signed representation agreements, and discussed strategy. When Sarah finally left Diane's office, she felt drained but also strangely relieved. She had taken the first concrete step toward ending her marriage and reclaiming her life. Over the next few days, Marcus made numerous attempts to contact Sarah. He sent emails to her work address, which she forwarded to Diane without reading. He tried calling Emily's house repeatedly until Emily told him firmly to stop or she would file a restraining order. He even showed up at Sarah's workplace one afternoon, waiting in the lobby until security escorted him out at Sarah's request. Each attempt made Sarah more certain that leaving him was the right decision. If he had truly been sorry, if he had truly respected her, he would have given her the space she clearly needed. Instead, his behavior showed what she was beginning to realize had always been true. Marcus's primary concern was Marcus. He wasn't worried about how much he had hurt her. He was worried about the consequences he was facing. News of the divorce spread through their social circle like wildfire, as Sarah knew it would. She told her closest friends and family members directly, explaining what had happened at the birthday party. The reactions were uniformly supportive of Sarah and condemning of Marcus. Some friends reached out to say they had suspected something was off about Marcus, but hadn't wanted to say anything without proof. This stung. Sarah wondered if she had been willfully blind to signs that others had seen. But she reminded herself of what Jessica had said. Trusting your spouse isn't a character flaw. Marcus had chosen to lie. The fault was his alone. At work, the situation with Amanda became complicated. HR launched an investigation into the relationship, as company policy prohibited relationships between employees without disclosure. Amanda ended up transferring to a different office, as she had mentioned in her text message. When Marcus was served with the divorce papers, Diane called Sarah to let her know. His lawyer contacted me within hours, Diane said. Which tells me he had already consulted one, probably in the past few days. That's good. It means we can move forward with negotiations quickly. Does he want to fight it? Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure what she was hoping the answer would be. No, Diane replied. His lawyer indicated he's willing to negotiate terms in good faith. I think he knows he doesn't have much ground to stand on. We have an initial meeting scheduled for next week to discuss asset division. The divorce process stretched out over the following weeks. There were meetings, phone calls, document reviews, financial disclosures. It was exhausting and emotionally draining, forcing Sarah to relive her betrayal repeatedly as she explained situations to lawyers and filed paperwork. 3 weeks after her birthday party, Sarah sat in a coffee shop with Jessica, reviewing her life in the way one might review the aftermath of a natural disaster. The divorce was progressing smoothly, all things considered. She and Marcus had agreed to sell the house and split the proceeds evenly. They had divided their joint accounts, separating their finances completely. Neither was seeking alimony from the other. Marcus's lawyer had tried to argue that some of Sarah's work bonuses should be considered joint assets, but Diane had shut that down quickly with documentation showing the bonuses were for individual performance, not marital contributions. How are you doing? Jessica asked, not for the first time. But this time, Sarah had a different answer than she'd had in previous weeks. Better, she said, and meant it. I'm not okay exactly. I'm not over it. But I'm better than I was. Sarah had been through a crash course in grief over the past few weeks. She had experienced denial, those first few hours after the birthday party when part of her brain insisted that what she had seen couldn't possibly be real. She had experienced anger, days when she wanted to scream at Marcus, to tell him exactly what she thought of him, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain he had caused her. She had experienced bargaining, late nights when she caught herself wondering if she had somehow contributed to his affair, if she had been a better wife, if she had paid more attention. She had experienced depression, mornings when getting out of bed felt impossible, when the weight of her loss felt too heavy to bear. And now, tentatively, she was beginning to experience acceptance. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, but an acknowledgement that this had happened and she would survive it. One thing that surprised Sarah was how much she was learning about herself through this process. Without Marcus, without the constant work of maintaining a relationship that had been slowly dying without her realizing it, she was rediscovering parts of herself she had forgotten existed. She had always been the accommodating one in the relationship, the one who adjusted her plans to fit Marcus's schedule, who compromised on decisions, who put his needs equal to or above her own. That was what you did in a marriage, she had thought. But now she was seeing how much of herself she had diminished in the process. She had stopped going to yoga classes because Marcus found them silly. She had given up on the book club she loved because it met on the same night Marcus liked to watch a certain TV show. Small things, individually meaningless, but collectively they had represented a slow erosion of her own identity. Sarah had started going back to yoga. She had rejoined the book club. She had started taking long walks by herself, something Marcus had never understood the appeal of. She had gone to a pottery class on a whim and discovered she loved working with clay. These activities weren't about replacing Marcus or filling a void. They were about remembering who Sarah was independent of being someone's wife. She had coffee dates with friends she had drifted away from during her marriage. She stayed up late reading books that Marcus would have found boring. She ate foods he didn't like and listened to music he couldn't stand. Every choice, no matter how small, was an act of reclaiming her autonomy. But there were still hard days. Days when she saw a couple holding hands and felt a sharp pang of loss. Days when she passed their favorite restaurant and remembered happier times. Days when she found some small item of Marcus's that she had missed in the packing. A shirt, a book, a coffee mug, and had to decide whether to throw it away or return it to him. Days when she doubted her decision to end the marriage so definitively, when she wondered if she should have tried to work things out, even though deep down she knew that was impossible. On those days, Sarah let herself feel the grief fully. She cried when she needed to cry. She called Jessica or Emily when she needed support. She wrote in a journal Diane had recommended, pouring out all the complex emotions she was experiencing. One of the questions Sarah kept circling back to was whether she would ever be able to trust someone again. Marcus's betrayal had shattered her belief in her own judgment. If she could be so completely deceived by someone she lived with, slept next to, shared her life with, how could she ever trust herself to read someone accurately again? Her therapist, Sarah had started seeing a therapist shortly after the birthday party disaster, had said something that stuck with her. Marcus's deception says nothing about your judgment and everything about his character. You trusted him because trust is the foundation of marriage. The fact that he violated that trust doesn't mean you were wrong to give it. Sarah was trying to internalize that message, but it was hard. The betrayal had left her feeling fundamentally unsafe in a way she had never experienced before. 5 weeks after the birthday party, Sarah received an unexpected phone call from Amanda. It came to her work number, which meant Amanda must have deliberately looked it up, knowing Sarah had blocked her personal number. Sarah stared at the phone for several rings before answering. Hello. Sarah, it's Amanda. Please don't hang up. There was a pause. I know I have no right to call you. I know you probably never want to hear from me again. But I needed to tell you something, and I couldn't figure out any other way to do it. Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. I'm listening. I broke things off with Marcus, Amanda said. That night after you caught us. I told him it was over, that I wanted nothing to do with him. He's been trying to contact me ever since, telling me that you've ruined everything, that we could have been together if you hadn't found out, that he's going to fight the divorce. He said what? Sarah felt a cold fury wash over her. Even now, even after everything, Marcus was trying to rewrite the narrative, trying to make himself the victim. He's been telling me that the divorce is unfair, Amanda continued. That you're taking him for everything he has. That you won't even listen to his side of the story. I just wanted you to know the truth. He's not sorry for what he did. He's only sorry he got caught. And I wanted to apologize to you again. I was complicit in hurting you, even though I thought your marriage was already over. I should have done more to verify his claims. I should have been more skeptical. Sarah took a breath. Thank you for telling me this, she said. And for what it's worth, I believe you when you say he lied to you. I know how convincing he can be. Are you okay? Amanda asked softly. Sarah considered the question. I will be, she said finally. It's going to take time, but I will be. After hanging up with Amanda, Sarah sat for a long time thinking about Marcus's attempts to contact Amanda. His claims that Sarah had ruined everything. The man she had married, or thought she had married, would never have said such things. The man she had thought she knew had been kind, considerate, honest. But that man had never really existed. That man had been a performance, a mask Marcus wore when it suited him. The real Marcus was the one who had lied for months, who had blamed others for his choices, who had refused to take responsibility for his actions. Sarah realized that she had been grieving someone who had never existed. The real Marcus didn't deserve her grief. That realization, painful as it was, brought a strange sense of freedom. She wasn't losing something valuable. She was escaping something toxic. The difference in perspective was profound. 6 weeks after the birthday party, Sarah and Marcus reached a final settlement agreement. The house would be sold, and they would split the proceeds 50-50 after paying off the mortgage and covering selling costs. Their savings and retirement accounts would be divided fairly. Each would keep their own car and personal belongings. Marcus would have 30 days to remove his remaining items from Emily's garage where Sarah had stored things she had packed from the house. After that, anything left would be donated or discarded. The divorce would be finalized in another few months once the mandatory waiting period was complete. Sarah signed the settlement papers with a strange sense of anticlimax. After all the drama, all the pain, all the emotional turmoil, it came down to signatures on legal documents dividing assets and ending a marriage. But maybe that was appropriate. The emotional ending had happened the night of her birthday party. This was just the legal conclusion. The lawyers had advised against Sarah and Marcus meeting in person, but there was one conversation Sarah needed to have. She called Marcus, actually called him, for the first time since that terrible night. "Sarah," he answered immediately, as if he had been waiting by the phone. "Thank you for calling. I've been hoping we could talk." "This isn't a reconciliation call," Sarah said clearly. "I just needed to say some things and then we're done." There was silence on the other end. Then, "Okay. I don't hate you," Sarah began. "I thought I would, but I don't. Feel sorry for you. You threw away 6 years of marriage, you hurt someone who loved you, and for what? For an affair that ended the same night I found out about it. For 3 months of excitement that cost you everything." Marcus started to say something, but Sarah continued. "I hope you figure out why you did this. I hope you get help. I hope you become a better person. But I also hope I never have to see you or speak to you again after today." "I am sorry," Marcus said, and for the first time, he actually sounded like he meant it. "I know that doesn't change anything. I know sorry doesn't fix what I broke. But I need you to know that I did love you. I do love you. I don't know what happened. I don't know how I let things get so out of control." Sarah felt something inside her shift. Maybe he did love her, in whatever limited way he was capable of loving. But love without respect, without honesty, without integrity wasn't enough. It had never been enough. "Goodbye, Marcus," she said. "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for." She hung up before he could respond. It wasn't a perfect ending, wasn't the dramatic confrontation she had sometimes imagined. But it was closure, and that was enough. 3 months after her 35th birthday party, Sarah stood in a new apartment. Her apartment, signed only in her name, paid for only with her money. It was smaller than the house she had shared with Marcus, but it was hers. She had decorated it exactly the way she wanted, with colors and styles that reflected her taste alone. The walls were painted a warm cream color. Plants sat on every available surface. Her book collection, finally unpacked, filled built-in shelves. The pottery pieces she had made in her class occupied a place of honor on the mantel. This space felt like home in a way the house with Marcus never really had. Looking back, Sarah could see that she had been trying to make that house feel like something it wasn't, trying to create the illusion of a happy marriage within its walls when the foundation was already cracked. Jessica had suggested, somewhat tentatively, that Sarah might want to do a birthday do-over. A small gathering of just her closest friends to celebrate her 35th year properly, without the shadow of betrayal hanging over it. Sarah had initially resisted the idea. The last thing she wanted was to relive that terrible night in any way. But Jessica had persisted, and eventually, Sarah had agreed. The do-over party was nothing like the original. Instead of 50 guests at a fancy lakeside restaurant, it was 8 of Sarah's closest friends at her new apartment. Instead of formal dress and catered food, it was jeans and takeout pizza. Instead of a 3-tiered cake, it was cupcakes from the bakery down the street. And it was perfect. Genuinely, wonderfully perfect. Sarah was surrounded by people who truly cared about her, who had supported her through the worst period of her life, who celebrated her not for what she represented or who she was married to, but for who she was as a person. One evening, sitting alone in her apartment with a cup of tea, Sarah reflected on everything she had learned over the past few months. She had learned that betrayal doesn't always announce itself with obvious signs. Sometimes the person deceiving you is also the person most convinced of their own innocence. She had learned that trust, once broken, changes shape. It doesn't disappear entirely, but it becomes more cautious, more selective, more hard-won. She had learned that she was stronger than she had ever given herself credit for. She had survived something she once thought would destroy her. She had learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. She was alone now, technically, but she was surrounded by love and support. During her marriage, she had often felt profoundly lonely despite sharing her life with someone. Sarah's view of relationships had fundamentally shifted. She used to believe that a good relationship meant never going to bed angry, meant always being a team, meant putting the relationship above individual needs. Now she understood that a good relationship meant maintaining your individual identity while choosing to share your life with someone. It meant healthy boundaries, not enmeshment. It meant honest communication, even when that communication was uncomfortable. Most importantly, it meant choosing someone who chose you back, really chose you every day through words and actions, not just through vows spoken at a wedding. She wasn't sure she would ever marry again. The concept of marriage itself had been tainted by her experience. But she was open to the possibility of love again, someday when she was ready. Love that was real and honest and reciprocated. Love that didn't require her to shrink herself to fit someone else's needs. 4 months after the birthday party, Sarah received a call from Diane. "It's official," her lawyer said. "The judge signed off on everything this morning. Your divorce is finalized." Sarah had expected to feel something dramatic in this moment, relief or sadness or anger or triumph. Instead, she felt quiet peace. A chapter of her life had closed. A difficult, painful chapter, but one that had taught her important lessons about herself, about relationships, about what she would and wouldn't accept in her life going forward. She called Emily and Jessica to tell them the news. They offered to take her out to celebrate, but Sarah declined. This wasn't really something to celebrate. It was just something that needed to happen, and now it had. She spent that evening alone, not sad or celebrating, just being present with herself and the reality of her new life. In a strange twist, Sarah found herself feeling grateful for what had happened. Not grateful for the betrayal itself. That still hurt, still angered her when she thought about it too much. But grateful for the clarity it had brought, for the wake-up call it had provided, for the opportunity to rebuild her life on a stronger foundation. If Marcus had never had the affair, or if he had hidden it more successfully, Sarah might have continued for years in a marriage that wasn't truly healthy. She might have had children with him, tying herself to him forever in a way that would have made the eventual dissolution even more painful. She might have wasted years, even decades, with someone who didn't truly value her. The affair, horrible as it was, had forced her to face truths she might have otherwise avoided. It had broken her life apart, but in doing so, it had given her the opportunity to rebuild something better. A year after that fateful birthday party, Sarah found herself planning another birthday celebration. She was turning 36, and this time she was approaching the milestone with very different feelings. The past year had been the hardest of her life, but also the most transformative. She had grieved, healed, grown, and rebuilt. She had learned to be alone without being lonely. She had rediscovered passions and interests she had set aside. She had deepened her friendships and family bonds. She had started a new project at work that she was genuinely excited about. She had even tentatively gone on a few dates. Nothing serious, nothing that demanded commitment, just practice in putting herself out there again, in trusting her judgment, in believing she was worthy of good things. The birthday party she planned for her 36th was different from both the party she had planned at 35 and the do-over she had done afterward. This one was a day trip with Emily and Jessica to a pottery studio where they would spend the afternoon creating pieces together, followed by dinner at a restaurant Sarah had wanted to try. On her 36th birthday, Sarah woke up in her apartment feeling genuinely happy. Not the frantic, effortful happiness she had felt during her marriage, where she was constantly trying to convince herself everything was fine. Real happiness, contentment. She thought briefly about where she had been a year ago, getting ready for a party that would end in heartbreak, married to a man who was betraying her, living a life that looked perfect from the outside but was hollow at its core. And she thought about where she was now, single, living alone, but more authentically herself than she had been in years. The journey from that night to this morning had been brutal. There had been days when she wasn't sure she would make it through, days when the pain felt insurmountable, days when she had questioned everything about herself and her choices. But she had made it through. She was still standing. Actually, she was more than standing, she was thriving. Sarah had learned that happy endings don't always look the way we expect them to. A year ago, her happy ending involved staying married to Marcus, maybe having children, growing old together in their house by the lake. That happy ending had been an illusion, built on lies and sustained by her own willful blindness. The real happy ending was this: Sarah, alone but not lonely, in an apartment she loved, surrounded by people who truly cared about her, engaged in work that fulfilled her, pursuing interests that brought her joy and, most importantly, finally truly comfortable in her own skin. She had caught her husband cheating at her birthday party, and it had been the worst night of her life. But it had also been the beginning of her real life, the authentic one, the one where she wasn't performing or accommodating or diminishing herself. That night had been an ending, but it had also been a beginning. And the story that had started with betrayal and heartbreak was, ultimately, a story about strength, resilience, and the courage to choose yourself. As Sarah got ready for her birthday celebration, applying her makeup and choosing her outfit, she looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Not because she looked so different physically, but because the person behind her eyes had changed so fundamentally. This woman was stronger, wiser, more self-aware. This woman knew her worth and wouldn't settle for anything less than genuine respect and honesty. This woman had survived something terrible and had come through it not just intact, but improved. She thought about the wish she had made when she blew out the candles at her birthday party last year. The wish for strength, clarity, and courage. Looking back, she realized that wish had come true, just not in the way she had imagined. The universe had given her exactly what she needed, even if the delivery method had been painful. Sarah smiled at her reflection, grabbed her keys, and headed out the door to celebrate. Not the birthday she had lost a year ago, but the life she had built from its ashes. And that, she realized, was the real celebration. Not what might have been, but what actually was. Not the fantasy of a perfect marriage, but the reality of a perfect moment of self-acceptance, hard-won and genuine. She had caught her husband cheating at her birthday party, and a year later, she had caught something far more valuable, herself. If you loved what should have been her perfect day. Thank you for listening. Every story changes when someone hears it. Subscribe, hit the bell, comment your thoughts, and share this video with someone who loves storytelling. Until next time, keep feeling, keep imagining, and keep sharing.